Greetings. In this lecture, we will be discussing issues of access in American education. The American educational pipeline. For every 100 ninth graders, 60 will graduate from high school. 40 will enroll in some form of college, be it community college, public or private entity, or for-profit institution. 27 will persist to their sophomore year in college, and 18 will graduate on time from college, which 5 years ago meant graduating in 4 years and now means graduating in 6 years. Yet we know from popular educational readings like American Higher Education in the 21st Century, college aspirations are high, and 7 in 10 high school graduates intend to start college each year. College students are more diverse than in the past. Today's student represents the average American. Smaller percentages of college students are traditional aged and enroll full-time. There is less of a shared college experience. Class attendance and homework now compete with work and family for most college students. Persistence and completion rates are very low among certain groups, particularly Black, Latino, males, and non-traditional students. The majority of college freshmen find they are woefully underprepared for college, both academically and financially. We find growing mental health issues across college campuses, and probably most troubling of all, we find that college graduates gain little by way of critical thinking during their college career. So let's talk about some realities of American schooling that might help us understand the American educational pipeline. To begin, the high school graduation rate is 70%, with many other countries boasting higher rates, such as Denmark with a 96% high school graduation rate, Japan with 93%, Poland with 92%, and Italy with 79%. Boredom continues to be a leading cause of the American high school dropout rate. 33% of all high school graduates are considered ready for college. 40% of all college students are placed into remedial courses. 65% of college professors report that what is taught in high school does not prepare students for college, as multiple choice assessments do not ask students to explain reasoning or apply knowledge to new situations. Nearly 50% of employers report that high school graduates are deficient for work, and 50% of all students who start college will graduate. The U.S. ranks 10th among industrial nations in the rate of college completion by 25 to 44-year-olds. Less than 25% of employers report that new college graduates have excellent basic knowledge and applied skills. 85% of current jobs require post-secondary education, and 47% of 18 to 24-year-olds voted in the last presidential election, compared to 70% of 34 to 74-year-olds. Higher education, U.S. versus the G8. The G8 include the 8 most industrialized countries in the world, whose representatives meet regularly to discuss economic and other policy issues. These countries include Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, the Russian Federation, the United Kingdom, and the United States. These countries are commonly selected for comparison because they are relatively similar to the U.S. in their economic development and because they are among our major economic competitors. To begin, U.S. higher education is the most expensive of all G8 countries. All spend more on higher education than K-12 education. The U.S. spends $24,400 per student at the higher education level and $9,800 per student at the K-12 level. Again, these numbers are on average. In total dollars as a percentage of gross domestic product, the U.S. spent 2.9% of its GDP on higher education and 3.8% of its GDP on K-12 education. Overall, the U.S. spent a higher percentage of its GDP on education, 6.7% more than all other G8 countries. Secondly, the U.S. educates the most international students. Nearly 2/3 of all international students attend a G8 institution. U.S. educates 20% of them, the UK 11%, and Germany and France 9%. The U.S. ranks last in science, math, and engineering degrees awarded with only 17%. The U.S. was the only country to award more degrees in arts and humanities than STEM. The U.S. ranks third in adults with a college degree. Russia had the highest proportion with 54% of adults aged 25 to 64 who had completed a higher education degree. Canada at 47% was second. The U.S. at 39% was third, followed closely by Japan at 38%. Italy was last at 13%. U.S. median income is lowest amongst those with a college degree. 42% of Americans with less than a college degree earn half the U.S. median income. Many beg the question, should we care about international rankings and comparisons? Current national educational policy is paying attention, and so should we, as policy is being dictated at the federal level more than ever before. Economically, world markets have shiftily integrated worldwide. It is more likely that we are competing with people with similar skill levels halfway around the world than with people just over the provincial or state line. The effect is to raise wages in less developed countries and depress wages in the most developed countries, and eliminating routine work and increasing the demand for people capable of knowledge work. Countries who want to maintain their competitive advantage in knowledge work will only be paid top dollar if they can invent the future, which will require world-class levels of creativity and innovation as well as world-class skills and knowledge. And finally, our children's future depends on us in the U.S. being competitive worldwide. We must ensure American educational systems, from K-12 to higher education, offer equal participation to individuals from all classes a fair chance to get the kind of education on which success is now based, are globally competitive on quality, and do this at a price that the nation can afford. All graduates must have highly developed critical thinking and problem-solving skills, collaborative skills with the ability to lead by influence, agility and adaptability dispositions, demonstrate initiative and entrepreneurialism, demonstrate effective written and oral communication skills, and the ability to access varied knowledge. Let's look at some comparison assessment data from the G8 countries. The Program for International Student Assessment, also referred to as PISA, is an international assessment that measures 15-year-old students' reading, mathematics, and science literacy every 3 years in more than 70 countries and educational jurisdictions. First conducted in 2000, the major domain of study rotates between mathematics, science, and reading in each cycle. PISA also includes measures of general or cross-curricular competencies, such as collaborative problem solving. By design, PISA emphasizes functional skills that students have acquired as they near the end of compulsory schooling. PISA is coordinated by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, an intergovernmental organization of industrialized countries, and is conducted in the United States by the National Center for Education Statistics. An assessment was conducted in 2015, with results expected to be published in 2016. The 2015 rollout will include a financial literacy assessment that all U.S. 15-year-olds will take. If we look at the PISA math data, we see that the U.S. ranks 30th among all nations who took the assessment, with Shanghai at number 1 with an average score of 613, Singapore at number 2 with an average score of 573, and Hong Kong with a score of 561. You see the U.S. sits at 481. When we look at the 2012 PISA reading data, we see the U.S. ranks 21st. Shanghai was number 1 with an average reading score of 570, Hong Kong at 545, and Singapore at 542. And finally, when we look at the 2012 PISA science data, we see the U.S. ranked 23rd, with the top 3 scores coming from Shanghai, Hong Kong, and Singapore once again. Here are some realities that many Americans believe are myths in explaining why international rankings are not too important. The U.S. educates the elite to a greater percentage than other industrialized countries, as demonstrated by our 70% graduation rate and significantly lower graduation rates for those from impoverished backgrounds. Other industrialized countries have similar diversity rates as the U.S., American students without an immigrant background only score marginally better than Americans with, and our competitors are doing it better than us. Socioeconomic status is a better predictor of educational attainment in the U.S. than most other industrialized countries, as SES predicts 17% of the variance in student performance. Most researchers point to low expectations as the largest hindrance to U.S. performance. And Americans rate their intellect and ability better than students in the highest performing countries rate themselves. President Obama has set the goal that we should be second to none in college degree attainment by 2025, which requires 16 million more degrees. The assumption for traditional students are the need to increase current high school graduation rates by 10 percentage points, increase college going rates by 10 percentage points, and increase college graduation rates by 10 percentage points. For Colorado alone, 1.1 million more degrees from traditional age students are needed, and 2.4 million more degrees from adult learners by increasing successful re-entry to higher education practices. What is required to increase U.S. educational attainment and meet President Obama's goal? First, we need to double the degree production of the 1960s with no compromise on quality, achieve equal participation and success rates at every level of SES and academic ability, increase educational attainment for average ability students, but the rate of participation has not matched the aspirations of high school students. For example, 80% of high school sophomores indicate they plan to obtain a BA, BS degree, and more than 90% plan some post-secondary education. Now, there are many challenges in meeting this goal. To begin, the skyrocketing of tuition and fees particularly hurts the middle class. The lack of policies to assist college goers to obtain high-quality degrees and credentials. The lack of institutional capacity to serve more students and increase system productivity. And lastly, the lack of state collaborative efforts around rigorous academic standards in K-12 to bridge the gap between high school graduation and college readiness, which also exacerbates the need for remedial education. From this slide, we can see that the U.S. does a good job of educating students from the highest SES quartile and highest achievement quartile, with a 97% college participation rate. But the work needs to be done with those from the lowest SES quartile and the lowest achievement quartile. Relatedly, this slide shows the relationship between SES across bachelor degree attainment, with the U.S. showing greater attainment by SES even when achievement is strong. If we look specifically at Colorado, we see the racial and ethnic breakdown of our K-12 population with high school graduation rates. 29% of schools are noted as Title I schools, meaning having high poverty rates and receiving extra federal funding. 38% of students are eligible for free or reduced lunch programs. 11% of students demonstrate limited English proficiency, and 10% of students have individualized educational plans. As a percentage, we see strong college attainment rates for racial and ethnic groups in Colorado, but numerically very small for some groups. This 50-state view of education and prosperity notes the Colorado paradox in education. States with the highest per capita income and the states with the strongest, most resilient economies have the highest percentage of citizens with a baccalaureate degree. Colorado is one of those states, but less because of its success in educating its own citizens and more because it has been extraordinarily successful in inducing well-educated people to move to Colorado. The percent of adults in Colorado with a college degree currently sits at 35.9%, while the U.S. rate is at 27.3%. In reviewing these last few data slides, we see we have a lot of work to do. Excellence and equity must go hand in hand if we are going to reach our goal of 60% college attainment by 2025. Students who fail in the educational system cannot be expected to become productive members of their communities. Without a quality education and marketable skills, failing students are more likely to be economic and social burdens as adults. There are real economic benefits to ensuring post-secondary education success for all Americans, such as savings in public expenditures on welfare, healthcare, law enforcement, and an increase in tax revenues and an increase in disposable income. While these are real costs, we also need to consider how an educated populace contributes beyond economic benefits. An educated citizenry is more likely to engage in political, societal, and economic functions that actualize the democratic ideals of the United States, like justice, peace, due process, honesty, egalitarianism, and human rights. Explanations for this phenomenon and levels of concern over its existence vary widely and are sources of much controversy, especially since efforts to close the achievement gaps have become some of the more politically prominent educational reform issues of our day. If there is no change in the educational system and the motivations of individuals, this process will continue to repeat itself across generations of students through the process of class reproduction. Each generation of school administrators and teachers, college officials and faculty, students, parents, donors, and legislators have wrestled with the perennial education question of who shall be educated and how. Over the next 2 weeks, we will consider this question with the use of the Rory and Thielen texts and primary source materials provided.